moderators introduce themselves after I give a land acknowledgement. So today, as we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded traditional lands of the Hupecheset and Sashat nations, who have deep connections to the broader language cultural group of peoples known as the Nuu-chah-nulth. These nations have deep connections to this land rooted in centuries of trade, commerce, and stewardship. Their knowledge and practices inspire us to work together to create an inclusive and thriving economy. So that's really important for us as the Chamber of Commerce, as the voice of business, a membership-driven organization, to acknowledge that trade and commerce happened on these lands before we arrived. And I also want to acknowledge that this is a nonpartisan event as well. So we have a team of moderators here to help us filter the questions. We reserve the right to edit questions for clarity and fairness and to be just fair. So without further ado, I would like Mike and Dave to introduce themselves.
Hello, good evening, and I thank each and every one of you for attending tonight because it's a beautiful evening in Port Alberni. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for having the wherewithal to follow through with what is a fine tradition in local Canadian democracy, and that is the all candidates meeting. In a minute, we'll introduce the candidates.
Good evening, everyone. David Wouchar, Operations Manager and News Director at 93.3 The Peak. Glad to be here tonight, even though it's really, really nice and sunny outside. I'd like to bring Jolene back to just go over the rules and regulations for the night.
So our rules and regulations are on our website on albernichamber.ca underneath events and all candidates meeting. All the candidates were given the rules and regulations with their invitation, but the short and sweet version, so that we have more time for question asking, is the candidates will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, their platform, why they're running. So that's 2 minutes each for their opening presentation. And then we will transition to question and answer period where we'll have the questions displayed up here. The moderators will read out the questions for the candidates. We can ask for repeats because there is 6 of them, and a lot of time can go by between when the question was originally asked. And then at the very end, we'll do 3 minutes closing statements per candidate. So that's the short and sweet version of the rules and regulations. They are also available on our website. So as you saw, we did the drawing order, and I'll let the moderators do their job now.
Okay, we have with us tonight 6 candidates of the 7 who are running. And from my left here, we have Brian Cameron with the Liberals. We have Chris Markovich with the Green Party. We have Gord Johns with the NDP. Next we have Jesse Musio, Christian Heritage Party. Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party. Speak up, please. Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party. And finally, on the end, we have Thomas Gamble, the People's Party of Canada. And that completes our roster of candidates. Now we'll open up for the candidates' presentations.
So we'll do the candidate statements now. Each candidate has 2 minutes for their opening statements. Names have been drawn at random. The first up to speak for the opening is Jesse Musio from the Christian Heritage Party.
I hope my 2 minutes didn't start when I started pulling that microphone. Good evening. As mentioned, my name is Jesse Musio, and I am your candidate for the Christian Heritage Party of Canada. I grew up in a very small town in northern British Columbia. After completing a degree in mechanical engineering at the University of Victoria, I joined my father and sister in the family business, and have since become involved in the management of other small businesses as well, including a modular home manufacturing company based here on Vancouver Island. My wife Brandon and I live in the big metropolis of Coombs, where we are both actively involved in advocating for vulnerable children and families. We believe that to reach their full potential, a child must be nurtured in a loving family. The family, as the essential basic unit of society, I believe, is under attack. Promoting the sanctity of marriage is often viewed as naive and old-fashioned. The rights of parents to raise their children based on their own values and beliefs is being eroded. Defending life at all stages, from conception to natural death, is seen by many as an attack on the rights and freedoms of others. Our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms starts with the words, "Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law." The Bible describes many individuals, nations, and leaders that ignored the supremacy of God. One description of this way of life is, they did what was right in their own eyes. The Peace Tower that rises over the main entrance of our Parliament building in Ottawa has 25 different scriptures incorporated into its design. This structure was built in the years following the First World War, when everyone was keenly aware of the very real possible consequences of leaders of nations doing what is right in their own eyes. I believe that if Canada continues to ignore the supremacy of God, and we continue to do what is right in our own eyes, we will reap the inevitable consequences that we are already seeing in the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of our citizens, of our children, and of our nation. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight, and I would ask you to consider voting for the Christian Heritage Party on April 28th. Thank you very much.
Next up is Teresa Knight from the Animal Protection Party.
Hi there, can you hear me? I'm going to have to hold this up because I can't figure out how to get it out. Okay, my name is Teresa Knight. I'm with the Animal Protection Party of Canada. I'm with this party because I don't like to see animals suffering, and we are inundated with images of animals suffering in factory farms and in research facilities, in social media and on TV. And it would be very nice if we didn't have to see it, but not because the people that film these atrocities are shut down, but because the actual abuse stops. So there is an animal protection party that formed with the sole purpose in mind of helping animals, but to facilitate this help, they have created an entire platform that covers every aspect of Canadian life and policy. So I'll get into that in a minute, but I want to say that most people who have their own dog or cat or pet realizes that they are not just an automaton, but that they have feelings and they're very much like us inside. And it is a crime, really, to treat an animal like this badly. So we would like, as a party, to increase penalties on people that abuse animals just on a day-to-day basis, but in addition to switch from those really abusive factory farms that exploit animals in horrific ways over to gradually plant-based solutions that don't hurt animals and that are much, much better for the environment. This can be done very easily with the government helping to get started more businesses like that and more production facilities. And research labs now are switching over to AI and biological methods that exclude the use of animals. So there is hope, and we want people to realize that many people care about animals, and hope that you will vote for them.
Next up is Brian Cameron from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Hi, my name is Brian Cameron. No relation to your lovely lake. I'm a new father to a 5-month-old daughter. I'm a renter. I live in the Comox Valley, and I stepped into this role to run for the Liberal Party of Canada because I want to make things more affordable, and I'm with the people who are suffering from the expenses that we're all dealing with today. In the summer of 2013, I biked across Canada for the Heart and Stroke Foundation. I lost my father and my grandfather both at 56 to heart disease, and I've been standing up for Canada and Canadians ever since. I've been to every province and territory. I've been up into the high Arctic. I formerly worked in film prior to my aircraft engineering career. Last Monday, I met with Prime Minister Carney and spoke with him about the issues we're facing here in the Courtenay-Alberni region. And I believe that something's got to give, and also the attacks from our neighbors to the south. We really need to be united and shore up our industries here in Canada. One of the ways the Liberal Party of Canada plans on doing that is by breaking down the interprovincial trade barriers. So that will allow small businesses here in the Alberni Valley to have access to new markets across Canada. And you'll be able to sell your goods to people in other provinces and vice versa. People in other provinces will have access to all the great products here in the Alberni Valley. I think it's very important that we stand united as Canadians, and we unite behind Prime Minister Mark Carney, because he is the man meeting the moment, and he is the man who has the connections in Europe and across the Pacific to help shore up Canada, protect our economy, and be the country the world sees us as. Thank you.
Next up is Chris Markovich from the Green Party.
Can everyone hear me? All right. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Markovich. I'm the federal candidate for the Green Party here in Courtenay, Alberni. I live in Courtenay as a renter with my wife and dog and cat, and we've been renters most of our lives. I was born and raised in Vancouver, lived there for over 30 years, and I lived in Ottawa for a time where I've worked behind the scenes for a couple different political parties. I worked in many industries, including hospitality, tech support, customer service, warehousing, etc. I know what it's like to struggle with affordability. I lived in downtown Vancouver for a number of years, and I've seen the effects that have taken place with regard to the toxic drug crisis firsthand. I'm also a person with lived experience. I've been substance-free now for almost 15 years. My journey is not unique. There are a lot of people, some of them may be in the audience tonight, with similar journeys to mine. And it's a really, really personal journey and a personal topic for me, which is why I chose to run in the first place. And it's also why I selected the file of mental health and addictions as critic for the Green Party. I'm passionate about issues like this, as well as I take a strong stance for LGBTQ rights, for trans rights. I participated or marched in pride parades almost every year since at least 1998. I know how the parties operate from working behind the scenes, so I would be an excellent choice for your next member of parliament if elected. I know how to work within the system as well as without, and looking forward to the discussion and taking your questions. Thank you very much.
Next up is Gord Johns from the NDP.
Hello? Sorry, wrong one. It's good now? Okay. Great. Nice to be here tonight. And I want to also acknowledge that we're in the unceded lands of Hupachuset and Sishat. And I want to thank Jolene Elliott, the Chamber of Commerce, for hosting tonight's event. And for all of you for taking time out of your evening to show up. And my fellow candidates for putting their names forward. Since being elected in 2015, I've been working really hard to bring forward your values to Parliament. And I should say, before I even get started, that I ran for Parliament because I saw people struggling. I saw families struggling. I saw the Conservative government cutting supports for people, cutting protections for our coast and for the environment. And just a bit about me for those that don't know me. I'm born and raised on Vancouver Island. My mom went to school in this riding. My great-grandparents got married in this riding. All three of my kids got married in this riding. And I am the only candidate that lives on this side of the hump in the Alberni Valley. I did live in Tofino before I got elected for 2 decades, where I was a small business owner. I ran the Tofino Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, and I sat in local government. So I have very good insight into our communities. And when I decided to run, I saw how hard my friends and family were working, how hard it was to get by, and how we were getting shorted when it came to funding for local and regional governments under the Conservatives. Under a Conservative government with a Conservative member of Parliament, we actually got less money than the average riding in Canada. So that inspired me to run to make sure that we had a strong voice in Ottawa to get our share. Right now, we need experience in Ottawa. And we've been able to prove with an NDP MP that we've been able to secure record amounts of investment in our riding for infrastructure, for housing, and for economic development. I want to go back and come out the gate right away to help support you as we take on Donald Trump and his tariff threats that are harming all of us.
Next up is Thomas Campbell from the People's Party of Canada.
Good evening. I'm Thomas Campbell, the PPC candidate for Courtenay, Alberni. I'm a former naval officer turned entrepreneur. I'm not really here to play politics. I'm here because the country's in trouble. And the same parties that caused it are not going to be the ones that can fix it. I stepped up with the People's Party so that the people in Courtenay, Alberni would have another option. The People's Party of Canada is based on 4 clear principles: freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. And our focus for this election is that it's time for reform. It's based on 4 pillars. One is to stop the mass immigration to protect our homes and jobs. Another one is to end the woke nonsense and restore Canadian values. Downsize the government and free the economy, and no more foreign wars, protecting our sovereignty. As time allows, we'll see about getting into more detail on these, but that's basically where I'm at for this election. Thank you.
All right, so we're just going to take a short break to transition to the Q&A. So if you are familiar with workings of smartphones and things like that, which is more than my abilities, we have a QR code that you can enter questions in. And if not, there is paper and pencils at the back of the room for you to put your question in, and we'll come back and start the Q&A session as soon as we get things together. There you go.
Do you support trans rights? What have you done to stand up for the rights of trans people?
First up is Jesse Musial of the Christian Heritage Party.
Hello again, Jesse Musial with the Christian Heritage Party. This question comes from a 13-year-old with trans friends, and I just want to acknowledge that the world that youth and young adults are growing up in today is significantly more fraught with difficulties than that maybe you and I, if we're older, didn't have to face. So this particular topic, I find, as far as to answer the question, what have I done to stand up for trans rights? I believe strongly in advocating for the weak, for the vulnerable, and I believe that the children that are experiencing these sort of these issues fall very firmly into that category. I believe they need to be it needs to be conveyed very clearly that each one, whether they categorize themselves this way or not, whether they see themselves this way, needs to be told and assured innumerable number of times that they are created in the image of God. They are extremely valuable. They're extremely precious, and that none should be shamed, none should be ostracized, and none should be discriminated against for how they view themselves. That being said, I do believe personally that every one of us was created in the image of God, created male and female. I do believe, it's my personal conviction, that there are 2 genders, and that the idea that there are more has caused far more harm, even though it is, I believe it in many cases it has been conveyed in an effort to promote value and promote love. But I do believe that in this case, our culture and our society is off track. And that we do need to return to biblical principles of who we are and why we were created. Thank you.
So the candidates have 2 minutes to answer each question. Next up is Teresa Knight from the Animal Protection Party.
Hi, well, I'm actually all for everybody being themselves, each to his own. And one of the reasons for this is I was married when I was 18 to a bisexual man, and that didn't work out very well. The reason being that he could not be monogamous in a situation where he felt attraction for people that weren't in marriage. So I think that with everybody being allowed to be themselves, it spares all kinds of people that unknowingly get married and fall victim to these people having to lie about who they are. It's not fair to the trans person, it's not fair to the person who marries them. So it's just way better if everyone just does their own thing in freedom.
Next up, Ryan Cameron from the Liberal Party of Canada.
So first of all, I'd like to just say I'm an ally. I used to live in Vancouver for a period of time, and I worked in the Davie Village. I've been a huge advocate for the LGBTQ+ community. The Two-Spirit people have been part of First Nations community since time immemorial, and I will always stand behind that. My campaign manager is part of this community. He is part of the LGBTQ+ community, and my family and I, we strongly support it. My wife's favorite show on TV that she doesn't miss every week is RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm a huge ally, and I will always stand up for everyone's rights because everyone deserves to live in safety, in comfort, and with respect. Thank you.
Chris Markovich, Green Party.
Thanks very much for the question. As I noted in my opening remarks, I've been part of Pride Parades most of my adult life. When I was in Ottawa, I actually worked on the campaign of then City Councillor Catherine McKenney, non-binary person who ran for council in 2014 and is now actually the member of provincial parliament for the NDP in Ottawa Centre. I also like to just give a special shout out to one of my dear friends, Faye Johnstone. She's the executive director of Queer Momentum, which is an LGBTQ advocacy organization that gets involved in local elections, federal elections, municipal, as well as provincial. And just want to reiterate that she's a very, very amazing person. And yeah, LGBTQ rights are super important and very special to me. A lot of my close friends and their families are part of this community. And I just want to point out also, with respect to communities that have had more than one gender for many, many years. Indian communities in particular, there's been 13 genders, I believe there is, for at least 2,000 or 3,000 years. So, more than one gender is not a new construct. As a matter of fact, heterosexuality and monogamy are actually, newer concepts than polyamory or whatever you want to call it, as well as communes. They've been around for hundreds of years, thousands of years in multiple communities all over the world. So definitely a supporter of the LGBTQ community, and will continue to do so on behalf of the Green Party. Thank you.
Gord Johns, NDP.
Well, first, I'm an ally as well. Clearly, everybody deserves to be treated with love, respect, equality, and I just want to highlight that I am definitely an ally. I've proven that. I show up for trans events, trans rallies in support of trans people, but we also know that trans people face a higher amount of risk, and they're very vulnerable because of hate, because of those individuals face disproportionately high rates of violence, discrimination, and so it's really important that we provide supports for people, that for trans individuals, beyond beyond trans people, it's also their family, their friends, their coworkers that are impacted. And I just want to highlight that it's everyone that sees when there's discrimination and hate. And we need unity, not division. And it's really important that we stand up for that. But when it comes to trans individuals and rights that we've been advocating for, I will highlight a few things. Mental health support with specialized affirming care that is needed to address the higher mental health challenges within the trans and queer community. Transgender healthcare. It's absolutely critical that trans people get the healthcare that they need and gender affirming care when they need it, and it's improved. Workplace equality. And I have a trans individual who's here tonight. It's on my team. Yay, Paige. Yeah, really great. Unbelievable. I'm so proud of who you are and love you. And also just ensuring that we make sure we've got targeted shelter space and supports for trans people that are homeless, for elder care, and ensuring that we support the Pride community with community funding. So those are some of the things that could go on for a while, but certainly we're very strong allies in the trans community.
Thomas Campbell, People's Party of Canada.
All right, now for something completely different. Gender ideology, I believe in respecting everyone, and I actually have a lot more trans friends than I probably should, given the statistical averages. But I draw the line at forcing the ideology on kids. We have federal funding pushing gender identity politics into classrooms, clinics, and workplaces. The PPC would put a stop to a lot of that. Protect its children, restore parental rights, and return truth and biology into public policy. Compassion shouldn't require dishonesty. This is a complicated issue that's hard to unwind in 2 minutes. So there's a distinction between the adults with gender dysphoria, which is a genuine medical condition, and need the sports. There's another to do with the rapid onset of gender dysphoria that we're seeing in school children. Especially young teenage girls. It has all the hallmarks of a social contagion. And the parties in power have been putting laws in place to set a one-way ratchet so that kids can be medically transitioned too early and sterilized. What this is starting to look like is basically eugenics in the 1930s. It was all compassion, but instead of it being the mentally handicapped, it's vulnerable children with mental disorder brought on by the gender ideology in the schools and the culture, and they're being, if they go to medical transitions, they end up being sterilized, and it looks like most of these kids might just be gay, right? So do the homework or look into it deeper. It is a complicated issue, but the PPC is not on board with modern day eugenics.
Thank you, candidates. Now for the next question. What can you do at the federal level to assist BC's shortage of doctors and facilities with capacity, especially here on Vancouver Island?
And the first to answer this question is Teresa Knight from the Animal Protection Party.
Well, I actually don't think they're going to have the same problem for very long. Apparently, there are lots of doctors wanting to come up from the United States due to Robert Kennedy being in charge of the health department and also them dropping out of WHO. So I do think we'll see a lot more doctors coming here and all will be well.
Next up, Brian Cameron from the Liberal Party of Canada.
I would just like to bring it back to breaking down the interprovincial trade barriers. I spoke with a woman who was telling me this exact issue. She has a daughter who's a doctor, and her daughter goes and works in Nova Scotia to make better money in Nova Scotia. And then the Nova Scotian doctors, from there, they go up to Nunavut. So it seems as though there's a bit of a domino effect across our country. I think we need to increase the wages, make it so we have an even playing field across the country. The same way as we break down these interprovincial trade barriers, I believe that we also need to level the playing field with healthcare. Because between province to province, there needs to be a streamline of support. My mother just moved out here from Ontario, from Ottawa, where I was born and raised. And back in Ontario, her hearing aids were covered. In BC, they're not covered. So I really believe that we need to level the playing field, and that will help us keep our doctors in our province, and so they're not going to other provinces to make a better wage, and make it so it's even across the country, and we will have more doctors serving our communities. Thank you.
Chris Markovich, Green Party.
Thank you very much for the question. One of the things that the Green Party has been pushing for a really long time and is definitely coming to the forefront a lot more with the issue of affordability in general, is guaranteed income. And we need to be able to attract more doctors and more professionals in general to this riding and ridings all across the country by providing them the services that they need for themselves so they can actually get on their own 2 feet and not have to be, housing insecure or food insecure. We need to expand our public health service to bring mental health, dental care, pharma care under the universal system that provides for everyone. We also need to address affordable housing. As you all know, in this community, affordable housing is very, very difficult. As a matter of fact, a lot of housing here and in my community as well, in Courtney, is really, really old, and it needs to be renovated or in a lot of cases replaced. So we want to implement a housing strategy that will build far more affordable and non-market housing than we've ever seen, probably since the 1970s. We also need to transfer federal funds directly to the service providers. I mean, a good example is the shelters here. I was fortunate to be able to take a tour at the Port Alberni shelter and the St. Women's shelter, and one of the things that constantly comes up is lack of services that connect to those facilities. And if we get more doctors coming in and implementing those services, then we can actually reduce the overall costs with all the ripple effects of everything else that happens in the community, like crime, like poverty, homelessness. So all of those things are interconnected, and we need a circular economy that addresses that. Thank you.
Well, first, it is core principles and foundational principles and values of the NDP healthcare. Obviously, it was Tommy Douglas that founded healthcare. It's in our DNA. We're a party of social, environmental, and economic justice, and healthcare is a key component of that for all of us. But every one of you deserves a doctor. Every one of you deserves access to healthcare. And our country has fallen behind. We saw the steep cuts under the Harper government to health transfers to the provinces and territories. We all see the ramifications of that. The Trudeau government carried those forward until we got into a minority situation. And it was actually the NDP that forced this government to increase transfers and focus on 4 primary areas: primary care, mental health, long-term care, and recruitment for doctors and nurses. That money is just flowing to the provinces right now. And it's nice that we've got a new provincial minister who's our MLA and who's revising how doctors get paid and making sure that it's more amenable to serving them. But some things that we've been able to do: increase healthcare transfers, fast track the immigration process so the doctors are in the fast track stream. Within 6 months, they can become a doctor. Good timing, because now we have American doctors that are going to want to hopefully come to Canada. Ensure that we're creating more spaces for doctors. And BC is doing just that, but they need a federal partner to help support that. We're building a new med school finally, after a couple of decades of being talked about in Surrey. That's going to make a difference. Listening to doctors, what they need. They need childcare that goes beyond the normal realm of time, so that it means shift change. Livable communities. Funny, we had doctors, they said, we need affordable housing because we come out of school with big debt. Relief for debt for doctors in rural communities. We were able to achieve that as well. And no more student loan relief. Those are critical aspects. But they said, we want to live in livable communities. So when you see a trail in this town and people talk about a recreation facility, think about that's part of our recruitment strategy for doctors here in the Alberni Valley.
And again, something completely different. Yes, wait lists are growing, but we don't need more money necessarily, we need more freedom. The PPC would let provinces run their healthcare by transferring the GST into tax points that they can then use without the federal strings attached that keep everyone beholden to a public-only system. We're not in good company. We're along with what North Korea and Cuba in terms of countries with pure public delivery. And that has a lot of ramifications, especially as the government starts introducing things like MAID legislation, where it might be cheaper just to inject you than cure you. A lot of the problem coming around with centralized control. If it all goes to the federal government pushes a lot of these things down. The provinces don't have the adaptability to fix what they need to. in terms of the immigration thing, it's always one of my pet peeves that we bring in these economic migrants, a lot of it based on their qualifications, their doctors, their nurses, whatever, and we have them sitting around for 10 years driving a cab because the colleges of physicians don't want to recognize these credentials. And we have a similar problem going cross-border or across Canada, where if you have your qualifications in one province, it makes it very hard to get a job in another. So better care starts with local control and patient choice. It's, at the rate it's going to collapse under its own weight. And finally, if you're in the province of BC, you do not have a doctor after the bills that the provincial NDP have been pushing through. You only have a government bureaucrat that will only give you what the government approves, not the medical necessity based on that doctor's training. Thank you.
Again, Jesse Usual, Christian Heritage Party. I know firsthand what it means not to have a doctor. I have one now, but for many years I was, if I needed any medical attention, making a drive from Coombs to Nanaimo to a walking clinic, maybe sitting there for hours, but actually more often than that, finding out that they were full for that day and I could come back the next day if I wanted to try again. Somebody near and dear to me was recently, it's been a while now, a couple of years now, diagnosed with a very serious cancer diagnosis, and based on the information that the Canadian medical system was giving them, they actually decided to take their concerns across the border to Mayo Clinic. They had the means to do so, which was wonderful for them, and they found the care there was exponentially better than it was on this side of the border. People are concerned about a two-tier health care system where those that have might be able to get better care than those that don't. We have that already. It's outside of our control. People can travel to other countries and can pay for medical care. So I think that there is an opportunity for more diversity in our medical system that I think will provide better care. One of the concerns that I've heard from medical professionals in British Columbia is in regards to some of the freedom of conscience that they don't feel like is supported, whether it is a vaccine mandate or a requirement to participate in MAID. There is, I've personally heard of and met medical professionals that have decided to leave the province for these reasons. I think that the federal government can do more to support families and communities, to which will, I believe, reduce mental health strain, which is a significant contributor to the demand on our medical professionals. Another major contributor to mental health, I believe, is childhood trauma due to broken homes and broken families. And so by supporting these families more strongly, we can avoid this trauma, which is documented to lead to addiction, to lead to homelessness, and many struggles that put extra burden on our citizens and on our systems. Thank you.
So as moderators, we decided we're not going to read this next question because it's deemed to be a little unfair and it's definitely unparliamentary to talk about someone who's not here, but certainly candidates are free to talk about it in their closing statements.
In the criminal code, Holocaust denialism is an offense. Do you support a similar law criminalizing residential school denialism? Why or why not?
And the first up for this is Brian Cameron from the Liberal Party of Canada.
Well, first of all, I'd like to reiterate that the Holocaust was atrocious. What happened, and also what happened to the First Nations, the original people of this land, was atrocious and disgusting, and it was genocide. I do support a law criminalizing it the same way that the Holocaust denialism is, because I just think that we as Canadians, it's already been put forward by our government that it was a genocide against First Nations people. It hurt so many people. I met a woman in Courtney the other day when I was collecting signatures, and this lovely woman, her mother passed away in childbirth. Her father drowned, and then at age 6, she was sent up to Alert Bay to the residential schools. She was in the residential school up there until she was 16, and she got out of there, and she told me it took her until she was 40 to heal. And she's now a strong, amazing woman. I was blown away listening to her story. She went and walked on the ground of that residential school up in Alert Bay. And there is no denying that there was a genocide against the First Nations of this people. And one thing to correlate between the Holocaust and the genocide against the First Nations in Canada is that Donald Campbell was the first Indian Affairs Minister of Canada. He was actually the gentleman who coined the term, the final solution. It has been part of the destruction of the First Nations had been started in the early days of Canada, and I am staunchly against it, and I think we need to stand up for side by side with our First Nations and take action on the 94 calls to action.
Chris Martin, who's a Green Party.
Thank you very much for the question. I just want to acknowledge and reiterate that any genocide out in the world, whether it's Turtle Island to Palestine to Yemen to the Congo, must be called out and must be exposed for what it is, and that is a genocide. So genocide denialism, whether we're talking about the Holocaust, whether we're talking about in Canada, should and always should be a crime, because the genocide itself is in a lot of places is still going on, and we're still having conversations even in this election about whether or not the genocide is even happening. So we need to really bring into the 21st century our view on what is and what is not acceptable. In Germany, it has been a crime since the Second World War to show Nazi symbolism. It is a capital offense, and we don't do anything close to that here. And even in the States, there are still states even now that fly Confederate flags. And we need to set a much better standard here. We need to renew and honor our commitments to UNDRIP and the TRC's 94 recommendations that were put out. Senator John Sinclair did an amazing job of putting forward a document that set the goals out very clearly and very deliberately, and it would behoove all of us here, especially as settlers on stolen land, to do everything that we can to condemn genocide whenever and wherever we see it. Thank you.
Lord John's MVP.
Well, first, like my colleague here said, you can't compare genocides. The Holocaust was evil and wicked. We all know that it's hate speech if you are not condemning, if you try to deny that the Holocaust existed. But the reality is, when it comes to residential school systems, that it was clear in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that it was cultural genocide. And when we sit and listen to survivors in our community, you know that it was genocide. And it doesn't take a long time for you to hear the stories about the suffering, the deaths that took place, the long-lasting systemic impact that has had on people in our communities and in the nations across Canada, and the impact that's had. My colleague Leah Gazan tabled a bill to make it denialism of the residential schools illegal. And I think part of the reason why we're not seeing Chris McNichol, why we're not seeing Conservatives showing up for any debates across Canada, is because we have a question. Is Chris McNichol support Aaron Gunn, who's a denialist, a residential school genocidal denialist? And we need to know. You need to know. You deserve to know. Indigenous people deserve to know. They have every right to know. And we need to hear from Chris McNichol on this, because he's in a lot of photos with Aaron Gunn. And it's harmful. It's harmful to Indigenous peoples. It's harmful to the survivors. It's harmful to their families. And this needs to be included in the criminal code. It needs to be hate speech. And we need to move forward with that. And I'm really proud of my colleague, and I'm proud of my colleagues from all parties that supported a unanimous motion identifying it as genocide.
Thomas Campbell, People's Party of Canada.
All right. The problem with putting anything like this into the criminal code is that it restricts our very basic freedoms of expression, which is right there against the charter. Even our hate speech laws as they currently exist probably shouldn't exist, because then we don't actually have freedom of expression, we only have licensed expression. It's only what the government approves of. So what happens when the government gets in that decides, instead of denialism, it's the affirmation, right? If it's, turn it around on its head. If, if it's illegal one day for, somebody in government to decide what opinions you're allowed to hold or express, and especially ones where the historical record may be murky, or at the very least it needs to be discussed to find out what's actually going on. Yes, I've heard a lot of the horror stories, and I haven't looked into it as much as I would like, but I've also heard the other side of people who didn't necessarily have issues with residential schools or experiences in being taken off the reservation when they were younger, which I'm not clearly expressing, but again, there's multiple sides to the story. A lot of what we've been fed in the last few years around this has a lot of murkiness to it, and to all of a sudden make that into a criminal offense is repugnant to our rights and freedoms. Thank you.
Jesse Musial, Christian Heritage Party.
Because I know it makes you cheer.
Well, again, thank you for the question. I just acknowledge that this is a very sensitive topic in our Canadian culture, and for good reason. When we received the question, first thing I wanted to do is just look up a literal definition of genocide. And there's a few different ones that come up. There is a genocide is violence that targets individuals because of their membership in a group. This one from from an EU website, an act committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. That is a very broad definition. And I think I would agree with some other candidates up here that comparing this directly with the Holocaust is a bit of an uneven comparison. But it begs the question of language. Words are powerful, words have meaning, and how we use them matters. And so I do think that according to this definition, the residential school, the history of residential schools in this country could absolutely be labeled as a genocide. I do believe that a much smaller incident could also be labeled as a genocide, and we have to be careful not to do injustice to different events by giving them the same label. That being said, I want to iterate a very brief story that I think is very relevant to this conversation. A friend of mine was in a car accident. They had to decide how hard to fight with their lawyers, with ICBC, to try to get compensation that they were served. They were clearly not at fault. But I was trying to advise this person, and a friend of mine said, you have to be careful when your mission is to label yourself as a victim, when that is your, when you're given the message that you need to define yourself as someone who has been wronged, that all of your effort goes into proving that you have been wronged, and your effort is not going into trying to pick yourself up and move forward with the greatest strength that you can. That being said, I think that we can do a great harm to our First Nations and to any group of people by encouraging them to focus primarily on what has been done wrong to them. Thank you.
Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party.
So I'm kind of on the fence about this one. I am for freedom of speech and not making illegal saying this, that, or the other thing. I didn't realize that Holocaust denialism was illegal. The problem with making anything like that illegal is you can come up with a situation like suddenly appeared in the States where that poor pro-Palestinian student was suddenly illegal for being pro-Palestinian and got exported from the country. So it's a fine line. Yes, I think if somebody is being ridiculous and saying there was no genocide in the case of Indigenous peoples here, don't vote for him.
next question. CBC, our national broadcaster, is a symbol of national unity. Do you support the CBC by continuing to fund or increasing funding to the CBC budget?
And first to answer this is Chris Margaret's Green Party.
Thank you very much for the question. Absolutely. The Green Party supports the CBC, CBC Radio, CBC Television, and all journalism and media in this country. I think it's fundamental to any democracy, especially when we're talking about standing up in front of a group of people at a forum and advocating for our political parties as to why we think we should be a good member of Parliament. Like Gord actually said a moment ago, I wish Chris McNichol was here as well, because hearing some of the things about the CBC that some of the Conservative candidates have said in the last number of weeks, I would like an answer to this question as well, because it certainly raised my eyebrows when I started hearing what he had to say and what other candidates have had to say about the CBC being state media or being liberal media, or to a certain extent, not unlike Russia, which is absolutely atrocious behavior, very, very troubling comments. And I think that especially in a community like ours and like in Port Alberni, rural communities especially need CBC radio. They need media that reaches every section of their community. We have such a problem with broadband and internet access where CBC gets through a lot of that. Radio doesn't need the same level of technology to get through to voters, to the general public, and it carries a lot of really, really great programming that everyone loves. I mean, CBC has been around for many, many years, and it's an institution, and I think we need to not only keep what funding we have, we need to increase it, and we need to expand access, not reduce it. Thank you.
Thanks. The CBC is vital to our national unity. It is absolutely critical for our culture. It is fact-checked. It is, when they report on the CBC, they have to be held accountable to us as Canadians, or they'll be also sued. And we know that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, they want to get rid of the CBC. Pierre Poilievre won't take questions, more than 4 questions right now on this campaign from reporters, and he won't take follow-up questions. Why? That's a good question to ask. Why is Chris McNichol not here? Because he doesn't want to answer questions. Why is Pierre Poilievre blocking his candidates from being at debates? Because he doesn't want them to answer questions. Now, the CBC is what connects us. I lived in Tofino, and I'd hear stories from you in Port Alberni and across Vancouver Island in our riding in our country. And that's what binds us. At a time where foreign interference is so strong, Russian disinformation is being spread, and on our airways and in the internet and in people's phones, we can rely on the CBC. It's one of the few sources of information that's accurate, that we know that we can trust. And this is at a time when AI is skyrocketing. This is what Pierre Poilievre wants to get rid of. You should be asking why. And then I think the question is, he's created his own media channels where there is no transparency and accountability, where there is no fact checks. That should be scary for all of us, especially with Donald Trump and the threat that we're having right now down south. They're attacking us. We have to protect the CBC. It's integral for us in terms of how we move forward as a nation and protect our identity.
Thomas Campbell, People's Party of Canada.
All right. Again, freedom of speech, freedom of expression is the first freedom that everything else depends on. The current governments and their supporters have pushed through censorship bills like C11 and C18, a lot of it to try and prop up the legacy media, of which we're paying millions, if not billions, in subsidies to every media or legacy media station in this country, not just CBC. We need to let the truth compete and let Canadians decide what they read, say, or believe. The The government wants to control the narratives and silence dissent. One of the main tools for this was the CBC, and it has gone way beyond a tool of unity. It has just become Pravda, government-funded propaganda to keep everyone in line. And I know some parties get more favorable treatment from CBC even when the Conservatives are in power. So I know they're very fond of this. But we need to get rid of the censorship laws. We need to defund the CBC, and we need to protect internet freedom. This happens every time a new revolution in communications comes around. It happened with the printing press, with the television, with the radio, and now it's the internet. The trick with the internet is it was specifically designed to resist government control as a defense measure to make sure that even in the event of a nuclear strike in the Cold War, that messages could get through around cities that have been destroyed. It resists censorship at every level, and it's a fool's errand to try. And to try and criminalize or disadvantage people from being able to use that medium is, again, repugnant to our traditions and freedoms. Thank you.
Jesse Musial, Christian Heritage Party.
Yeah, the question referred to the CBC as a symbol of national unity. I think for many Canadians that is true. I can also say that I'm familiar with many Canadians for whom that is not true. Many people view the CBC as not being an unbiased source of information. I can tell you from my own personal experience that I do appreciate the CBC. I personally really cannot stand watching American media, American news, just because they have, for a large part, thrown away even the appearance of objectivity. I believe that the CBC at least very strongly presents itself and tries to present itself as objective. The policy and the position of the Christian Heritage Party is that under a Christian Heritage Party government, the CBC would be defunded. I grew up in Northern Canada where there was very few options for television and radio, and CBC was always one of them. And it was frequently enjoyed by myself and my family. That being said, we do live in a time now where the isolated parts of our country are not nearly as isolated with satellite internet and other modes of connectivity. I don't believe that the CBC is as essential a service as it once was. That being said, I would, if given the opportunity to speak towards this policy, I would advocate for maintaining CBC radio in communities that have limited alternatives. Thank you.
Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party.
Well, I've lived quite a few places in Canada, and the one thing that they all have in common is CBC is on the radio. And I think that it does foster a real sense of unity across Canada and is a very valuable institution. Having said that, they wouldn't represent the Animal Protection Party as one of their running parties. So I wasn't happy with that, so perhaps they're filtering a bit. But by and large, I'm 100% for the CBC as an unbiased Canadian forum.
Brian Cameron, Liberal Party.
First of all, I'd just like to say CBC is Canada. What would Canada be without hockey night in Canada? Who would we be as a nation? Growing up, when going camping with my family when we were young, CBC, you could always get it on the radio, no matter where you were. My mother still religiously listens to the talk programs on CBC. One of our most famous Canadian comedians, Colin Mockery, he wouldn't have got his start if it wasn't for the CBC. The CBC is Canada. And actually, just yesterday, Chris, Green Party Chris, not McNichol, and I were at a speaking engagement at a seniors home, and surprise, surprise, Chris McNichol actually showed up, and this question was asked to him. And his response was, well, I believe in capitalism, and there should be competition, and the CBC, no, I don't think it should be funded, it should be private business. Now, I don't agree with that whatsoever, and I also find it very rude to the people of the Courtenay Alberni riding that your Conservative candidate isn't showing up for these public discourses. Because how do you expect to represent a riding if you're not even listening to the people within it? You can't. You're not actually hearing what the people want, what the people need. You're not working for them, you're working for yourself. And in regards to the Pierre Poilievre wanting to defund the CBC, that is their plan. They don't believe in the CBC, and I believe that Mark Carney is the man who will protect and stand up for our country. My uncle was the late Dalton Camp, so there's a lot of old progressive conservatives coming and joining the Liberal Party because they don't identify with these crazy ideas of Pierre Poilievre and his party.
Thank you. Next question. How will you advance the implementation of Canada's United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act? Want me to read it again? How will you advance the implementation of Canada's United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act?
First up is Gord Johns, NDP.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate whoever put this question forward. This is such an important question because we know Canadian law discriminated against Indigenous people for way too long, far too long. And actually, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, first, I want to give a huge shout out to all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, because it was their hard work that persevered and pushed and were determined to get Canada to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples so that we could harmonize our Canadian law so that it worked with Indigenous peoples, and also to ensure that we reform all of our laws to do so. Now, we haven't done enough on this, and we need to do more. Romeo Saganash from the NDP is actually the one who tabled the first bill on UNDRIP. He started his cross-country tour right here with Nuu-chah-nulth. And so it's really important to Nuu-chah-nulth people, and it was a really special time that he kicked off his nationwide tour to have that supported by the federal government and passed. But we got a long way to go, because UNDRIP is now law, but still Indigenous people don't, in many places, don't have clean drinking water. Here in our riding, don't have adequate housing. They're living in overcrowded and unsafe, untenable housing, or they're homeless. We know that it's critical that Indigenous people, that we honor them and respect that they have free, prior, and informed consent when we do any activity, economic development activity, in their territories. And we support their right to self-determination. But we also know that Pierre Poilievre voted against UNDRIP. He voted against it. So what's he going to do when he gets back into power, if he gets into power? We saw him fight Indigenous people every day. We saw him cut services to Indigenous people when he was the Deputy Prime Minister. And I wish Chris McNichol was here, so we could ask Chris, what are their plans?
Thomas Campbell, People's Party of Canada.
The UN is an interesting animal and has gone well beyond what its mandate was originally supposed to do. The purpose of the UN is to keep us out of hell. It's not to try and bring around heaven on earth. So a lot of the treaties and whatnot have been brought in by the UN, by a bunch of globalists who think that they know how to run our countries better than we do. We have enough trouble just sorting out our national politics or our provincial politics. So what makes us think that we're going to get better representation by the UN with a bunch of unelected bureaucrats over there? One of the main things that we'll get into the sovereignty bit. As far as the Indigenous policy for the PPC, we can see how decades of top-down governance from the federal level has completely failed Indigenous communities. When other parties talk about building all the homes to try and deal with the demand, I think the Indigenous policies of that we look at and the housing issues that happen on reserves are indicative of how bad government is at trying to do things like housing, and it should be out of that business. The policy for the PPC is to basically repeal the Indian Act and the other federal dependency structures that leaves Indigenous peoples pseudo wards of the state are in this weird area of flux. We're supporting self-government, property rights, and economic freedom. The idea will be to renegotiate with the Indigenous for real independence instead of continuing dependency on the federal level. Thank you.
Jesse Musial, Christian Heritage Party.
As I mentioned, or alluded to in a previous answer, I think the relationship of our government with our First Nations citizens is not a particularly healthy one for many reasons. A lot of that has to do with history, but a lot of it has to do with the way that we are approaching that relationship today. As I mentioned before, there are ways to relate that are empowering, and there are ways to relate that really enable or even contribute to ongoing cycles that are not constructive. I think that it is critical that we recognize and acknowledge and respect the First Peoples that have been in our country, in this territory for centuries. But at the same time, I think we can go too far and send the message that that their welfare is the government's responsibility, and therefore that they are encouraged not to take more license and agency over their own well-being, over their own determination. So I think that the way that we are going about this conversation, the way that our government and policies have treated First Nations, we're adding harms on top of harms, in my opinion. I think we can do more to send the message that that each and every one of us has the opportunity and the ability to take care of ourselves, to take care of our families, to take care of our elders, and that the more that we depend on the government for the means to do that, the more that we're depending on an entity that will make mistakes and will leave out important things. There's no way that a federal policy can adequately address every single different situation across our country. So I think we need to give more power to our First Nations, and part of that is in how we treat them and how we speak about the conversation. Thank you.
Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party.
Well, this is a puzzling problem. The First Nations were here first, and we owe them a lot. But I don't have the answers. What I think must be done is that we have to talk with them, and then they come up with ideas as to how they would like to go forward, and we would facilitate or make it easy for them to do that in whatever ways we can.
Brian Cameron, Liberal Party.
So we need to take action on every single one of the 94 calls to action made by the TRC. And we need to support by working nation to nation and become the Canada the world sees us as. Because until we're working with the First Nations of the original people of this land, we are not the country that we are seen as on the world stage. As far as the Conservative government's support of First Nation, I have a personal story from that. When I was up in the high Arctic, I was with our guide. I was up doing a filming project. Our guide on the trip, he's now the Commissioner of the Northwest Territories. He told me a story back when Harper was in power. Harper had brought out these ships to look for the Erebus and the Terror. And they had spent all this government money looking for these boats. And this elder lady saw these boats and said, "What are those ships doing out there?" And she was informed that they were looking for the Erebus and the Terror. And she said, "Well, why are they looking there? You go to this point, and it's 1 kilometer off the point." That information was conveyed to those ships that the government had spent the Conservative government had spent so much money on funding to get up there. And guess where they were? Exactly where she said they were. Now, just because it's not a written history, oral history is equally as valuable. And we need to listen and work with the First Nations of this land, because we are on their land, we are guests.
Chris Markovich, Green Party.
Thank you very much for this question. It's an important one, and it's one in particular in this riding that we need to be prepared to answer on a daily basis. The Green Party reinforces its commitment commitment to Indigenous sovereignty. We were actually one of the first political parties to explicitly renounce the doctrine of discovery. We believe that this country was founded on stolen land. It is founded on stolen land. And we owe it to every Indigenous population, whether it's First Nations, Métis, Inuit, or other Indigenous nations. That stewardship, we need to work in partnership with them nation to nation. And one of the bills that Elizabeth May actually brought forward in the last Parliament was Bill C-226, which was recognizing environmental racism and commitments to environmental justice. And it was unanimously adopted, I might add. So that's a very, very good thing, and it's an important step towards implementing those 94 recommendations. Just the fact of recognizing that what has happened is wrong and we need to do something about it. We need to protect Indigenous rights to the harvest of shellfish, as it's really, really important, and it's protected in their treaties. We also need to dedicate ourselves to Indigenous-led restorative justice. I mean, the Indigenous population here in Port Alberni is about 17%, and the national average is about 5%. So it's important, even more so in Port Alberni than just about anywhere else in Canada, especially on the West Coast, where we're talking to them and letting them lead the conversation in terms of how we remediate the historical wrongs that we have in this country. And we're also committed as a party to implementing all of the calls of the Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry. And it's definitely important that we talk to all of the relevant partners that are working, that are doing this important work, and make sure that we let them lead and we have to follow them. Thank you.
Next question. In the United States, women's rights are being stripped and threatened. How do you support women's health care, abortion rights, and access to contraception?
First up is Gord Johns.
So I think it's pretty straightforward for me. Your life, your body, your choice. And it's for women. Men shouldn't be making decisions around women's bodies. And I think that in Parliament, we shouldn't be doing that. I think it's really important. We saw what happened in the United States with Roe versus Wade and what's going on with Donald Trump and the Republican machine down there and the threat to women in the United States. That's not far off. We've seen Pierre Poilievre vote constantly against women's rights. Yeah, okay, thanks for giving me the figure out there. But the reality is, abortion is healthcare. And in Canada, we hear often about the Liberals saying that they support abortion and they support healthcare for women. But the reality is that often women can't get access to care in this country. In fact, New Brunswick, they just closed their healthcare facility that performed abortion, so women can't get access in New Brunswick. And it's really important that we make sure that all women have access to the healthcare they need, and to make sure that we make sure there's no barriers when it comes to women. And in terms of public universal health care, it is fundamental to all of us to make sure. And again, with Pierre Poilievre, I don't think people can trust what he's going to do, because his caucus, the majority of his caucus, has been voting against a woman's right to choose. And it's up to a woman. It's up to a woman and her rights to choose.
Thomas Campbell,
Oh boy, is this going to be an unpopular opinion. Canada is one of the only civilized countries that doesn't have any legal limits on abortion. The reason for that is the Supreme Court striking down laws years ago, and no party has had the backbone to actually put a law back in place. We haven't had the discussion or the debate for a generation. So, PPC believes Parliament should have the courage to debate and legislate on this, and it will support free votes and work towards laws that will reflect Canadian consensus, like limits after the first trimester. It's not just a healthcare question. We are talking about the rights of the defenseless when we're talking about the rights of the unborn, the same as we would talk about rights of children. At some point, the being inside the woman becomes its own sovereign individual. And nowhere in our history of the Western tradition, going back to Roman times through English common law, or even the Middle Ages, do we have this miraculous right where suddenly a woman is somehow able to terminate her pregnancy. It's actually quite the opposite in that it was generally taken as a moral grievance, and murder laws reflected that, in that murdering a pregnant woman carried stiffer penalties than just the one individual, because it's taken as that. There being two lives at stake. So the debate has to be had. I used to fall actually more on the pro-choice side when I was younger, when it was argued that it would be safe, legal, and rare. And we've gone way beyond that. So it's well past time that we actually have the discussion and figure out where we want to place the value on those lives. Thank you.
Jesse Mansfield, Christian Heritage Party.
I imagine most of you know where I stand on this. The Christian Heritage Party is the only political party in Canada that is 100% pro-life. It is the party's position, and my own personal belief, that from the moment of conception, a human being is a human being, regardless of their size, regardless of the location, or regardless of their level of autonomy. I believe that this is probably the single biggest issue for the vast majority of people that will vote for the Christian Heritage Party. My own personal conviction is that the abolition of slavery was done, I believe it was largely championed by God-fearing Christians, and their firm conviction and belief was these are people too, contrary to much of the popular opinion at the time. So my own personal conviction and the position of the Christian Heritage Party is that every life is precious, every life is created in the image of God, every life must be defended without exception, from conception until natural death. Thank you very much.
Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party.
Not every life that must be protected, does that include animals? Okay, so I'm all for women and women's rights to be themselves and have the right to do whatever they want. Well, within the law.
Brian Cameron, Liberal Party of Canada.
A woman's body is a woman's choice. I was mostly raised by a single mother after losing my father when I was younger. As I mentioned, my wife and I recently had a daughter 5 months ago. My daughter was born the night of the US election. And as I mentioned, she is the reason why I'm standing up. I live in a household of women, my wife and my daughter, and my mom has recently moved nearby. And we named our daughter in honor of one of the greatest Canadian women, Nellie McClung. So we named our daughter Nell. Nellie McClung, if you don't know, she was a suffragette who helped get the vote for women in this country. So I am a huge advocate for women's rights. I will always stand side by side with women for their rights, for their the rights over their body, mind, and everything. Because at the end of the day, we all have a mother, and we should respect our mothers and respect all the women of this country and the women around the world. Thank you.
Chris Martin, Green Party.
Thank you very much for the question. Anytime I'm asked this question, I'm reminded of that protest sign that I've seen circulate around the internet. This woman in her 70s or 80s holding up a sign that says, "I still can't believe I have to protest this shit." That's basically where we're at right now. I can't believe we still have to talk about this as if it's a controversial thing and as if it's something that we can debate. You know, women's health is women's health. And not just women, but trans men and non-binary people, they can get pregnant and they should be able to have access to health care, which also includes gender-affirming care. So the Green Party is unequivocally pro-choice, has been for many, many years. And I've talked personally with Elizabeth May on this, and there's just no question about it in my mind or in hers. I also grew up in a house with mostly women. I've seen a lot of the struggles that they've gone through, throughout their lives, throughout my life. And, the Green Party is fully committed to the rights of women, trans people, non-binary people. One of the things that I always think about when the issue of abortion comes up is, particularly with the respect of the unborn, we always talk about the unborn. Well, what about the rights of babies after they're born, right? A lot of people are so quick to judge someone for having an abortion, yet they don't provide food stamps, they don't provide welfare, they don't provide any of the services that people need once they're alive. So why would it be any different? Anyway, I won't take up too much more time, but I just want to reiterate that abortion is healthcare, and it shouldn't be a debate in 2025. Thank you.
Next question.
Thank you.
Single seniors pay relatively more in taxes on the same household income as seniors couples. How will you support tax fairness for single seniors? And we deliberately pushed this question to the front so that it wouldn't go unasked and seniors would have a chance.
And first answer is Thomas Campbell from the People's Party of Canada.
All right, the People's Party of Canada's position on this, basically we come back to economy, taxes, and sound money. The growth is stagnant, the inflation's high. The inflation is caused by excessive and reckless government spending. They either tax and spend, borrow and spend, or print and spend. All of these are reducing the savings of our seniors and anyone on fixed income in ways that are far in excess of what we've seen in the historical norms. People's Party set the target Bank of Canada inflation rate to 0%. We changed the formula back to what it was so that politicians can't pretend like inflation is okay when it's not. I mean, we've already done 15 to 20 years of underreported inflation even before the chaos of the COVID spending in the last 5 years. We look at cutting personal and corporate taxes and eliminate capital gains so that retirees, as they're exiting any businesses or cashing out their investments, have even less of an inclusion rate on those taxes as they're able to cash out. Personal and corporate taxes, and the other part is cronyism. We need to stop letting Ottawa pick winners and losers there. Thank you.
Jesse Musial, Christian Heritage Party.
The question is framed as being a seniors issue, and I don't debate that it is. I believe that this is not uniquely true of seniors, that in any household with two people, that if there's just a household with a single person earning the same as those two people put together, that the way our tax system works, the way our tax brackets work, that the greater income per person will always see a higher effective tax bracket. That being said, I think it was asked in this way because there are people in our community that are seniors that are feeling this acutely. The Christian Heritage Party has a policy on taxation that is actually, might surprise some of you. It is the complete elimination of any and all income tax, and that 100% of federal tax revenues would be realized strictly through purchases and not through income. And so that is the Christian Heritage Party's federal tax policy, and that is what I would be championing if I were elected. Thank you.
Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party.
Sorry, but the question is a little unclear to me. So, is it income tax or health tax or both that they're charged more? Anybody? Just income tax? Okay, and then so if two people are living on the same salary as one person but paying the same tax, But I still think if two people are living on the same amount of money, maybe they deserve a break. So it actually seems fair to me.
Brian Cameron, Liberal Party.
So after the pandemic, there was no work in aviation. So I took a job working for a medical equipment company. And in doing that, I ended up going and helping seniors as well as veterans with their mobility aids. So I was exposed to a lot of veterans as well as seniors living alone and living with whatever extra hurdles they have in their life. And I met a number of people that weren't supported and weren't living in dignity. And that hurt my soul to see. And it is another one of the reasons why I am running today. A woman, I was dropping boxes off at a friend's house the other day because he was moving. And I talked to a woman outside, and she was living on her own. She was living in a building that was supposed to be no more than 30% of her income. And she was paying over 100% of her income just to put a roof over her head. And I think that is unacceptable. We need more support for our seniors. We need to make things more affordable. And part of that, part of the Liberal platform is the newly announced Canada Builds Homes, which is a $10 billion plan to build 500,000 new homes across Canada. And $2 billion of that 10 is allocated to students and seniors. I think that is so important because we need to take care of the generation that built this country and put in their hard work and let them live in dignity. They need to have the support systems, and if elected, I will go to Ottawa and I will fight to make things more affordable for the senior population and everyone else here in the riding. Thank you.
Chris Margaret's Green Party.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. The Green Party has a couple of different ideas in terms of how we can get more money and more income freed up for our seniors. One of them that we just announced last week is raising the income threshold from $15,000 to $40,000, which would help a lot of people, especially that are on the margins. About 75 to 80% of the Canadian population makes about 40,000 or under, about 60,000 or under, so that would help a lot of people with their income. But we also think that, like my other colleagues have talked about, we need to build more housing. And the Green Party actually wants to triple the amount of housing that's planned by building $1.2 million affordable homes over the next 7 years. We also want to revitalize the CMHC and mandate it to build non-market and affordable housing, including for seniors. We also need to look at long-term care. Seniors often get separated if they're in a relationship, and one senior is aging at a more accelerated rate than the other. The place I went to just the other day, I was talking to a fellow that his spouse was in long-term care, and the rates that they set for rent or for care are different depending on whether or not you live on your own, if you're independent, or if you're being taken care of by the government. So we need to harmonize all of these together, and we need to implement a guaranteed livable income, right? Because pensions and seniors' benefits are often below what the market is for a rental, as Brian pointed out. It's really a dire situation that we're in, and we need to do something about it. We need to do it fast. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that the question is an excellent question because we know that couples, when you look at a senior and their income, they're about, if you're a single senior, your costs are about 2/3 of what a couple is. And about over 30% of single women seniors are living in poverty. That's unacceptable in our country. What we propose to do is to actually give a 30% tax deduction for single seniors. So they would get 30% tax deduction off their income that would be taxable. So that would be one to start. The Liberals put forward an increase on the OAS, as you recall, but they only applied it to those that are over 75 years old. So they created a two-tier system for seniors. It's unacceptable. So people between 65 and 75, they got pushed out. They didn't get the increase. Totally unacceptable. We've talked about and what we want and what the NDP is pushing for. You've heard us talk about a guaranteed livable income. Well, we need to start with seniors. We need to start with people living with disabilities, like bare minimum. Nobody should be living in poverty. That's, contributed to our society. We know we failed when it comes to Canadian pension plan and taking it off of people's income. But imagine, you're a single senior, you don't have that CPP and your spouse dies, and you don't get the benefits of the pension. That's what's going on a lot. We need a national senior strategy. And when we talk about things that we push for, dental care, pharmacare, these are critical to take pressure off of seniors. And when it comes to housing, Chris touched on it, but when we are at 3.4% non-market housing, Britain and France are at 17, the Danes are at 21, the Netherlands are at 34%. They don't have seniors living on the streets. We have to scale up non-market housing. We have to do it right away. And we have the lowest amount of non-market housing in the G7. And we have the lowest corporate taxes in the G7. How's that working out for seniors?
Thank you, and that brings us to our final question of the evening. How can you prevent businesses from abusing the temporary foreign worker program by using it to replace local Canadians, local workers with cheaper foreign labor? How can you prevent businesses from abusing the temporary foreign worker program by using it to replace local workers with cheap labor?
And first up with us is Jesse Musial, Christian Heritage Party.
Well, one way to prevent the abuse of the temporary foreign workers program would be to eliminate the temporary foreign workers program. We wouldn't have the program, we wouldn't have the abuses. That being said, I do know that the temporary foreign worker program has been extremely beneficial to many businesses that would otherwise have great difficulty in staffing their operations. I believe it was right here in Port Alberni that a local company in the last 6 to 12 months was found to have kept a large number of temporary foreign workers in very much inadequate housing, and I feel very strongly that that is a significant abuse of that program. As long as that program is operational, I do think that we need better controls in place, better opportunity for those temporary foreign workers to report in a way that does not go through their employer, the conditions in which they are working, and keep employers held accountable. That being said, that I do think that we have opportunity to encourage our young people to get into the workforce, and I think that limiting temporary foreign workers is a good way to ensure that our own citizens have an adequate opportunity for those jobs. Thank you.
Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party.
Well, it seems to me that immigration has had in place a law or a rule that foreign workers were only allowed in circumstances where there was nobody local to fill that position. And if that is the case, I think that's fine. So let people that are local or whoever wants the job have the job first. Only allow foreign workers to come in if and when there is a vacancy that nobody can fill here. I do think foreign workers are probably necessary at harvest times and whatnot.
Brian Cameron, Liberal Party.
I believe we need to put programs in place to make sure that no Canadian has applied for the job first, and whatever for the job that this foreign worker is looking to take, and make sure that we allot time for that business to find a Canadian worker. And my wife is an immigrant. My wife was originally from Australia, and I think that at the end of the day, a lot of these foreign workers that are human beings, right? And they're just trying to make a better life for themselves. And I definitely feel for them, because all they're trying to do is come to Canada and be a part of this wonderful country we have. And what we're doing with just bringing people over, and then putting them into jobs and not supporting them correctly is giving them not the right, correct life. And we're also hurting our Canadian workers by doing so. So there's no winners in that situation. So we do need to put programs in place to make sure that those jobs first go to Canadians. And if there isn't any Canadian stepping up to the plate and going for that job, then we can open the discussion about bringing in foreign workers to fill those positions. Thank you.
Chris Markovich, Green Party.
Thank you very much for the question. I think I'm just going to come out and say it because this is a problem with just about everything that we've talked about so far tonight. We need to dismantle capitalism. That's really where it boils down to. Because we are always chasing the most money for the lowest amount of cost. And it doesn't matter what the cost is to the human life or to animal life or to plant life around us. And we've proven it time and again with trade deals like FIPA that we got locked into by the Harper government. For about 30 years, I believe it is, we're locked into this with provisions like the investor-state dispute solutions. And foreign governments, or foreign companies rather, can sue our government if we enact environmental laws that affect their bottom line. So temporary foreign workers program is part and parcel with that. And so until we really take a hard look at how we do business in Canada and around the world, that we're not going to be able to get rid of programs like this. And it's really unfortunate because the human cost is astronomical. You know, these programs are rife with abuse. People's passports are being taken, their rights, they have no rights when they come here. They're not citizens, they're not landed immigrants. A lot of them come in illegally or are shipped illegally, which is a horrible thing to think of. No one benefits except large corporations that make a killing, quite literally in some cases, off of human misery. And temporary foreign workers program is part and parcel, and it's a symptom of a larger problem. Thank you.
Jobs and VP.
Well, I mean, we know that the Harper government brought in temporary foreign worker program, and it's been exploited by many employers. Some employers have been good. They treated their employees well. But most importantly, what those employees all deserve is they deserve their rights to be respected. They deserve to not live in fear, worried that if they lose their job, that they get kicked out of the country and sent home, or they lose their housing. This is something that vulnerable people, we've seen it, we've witnessed it, that workers have been abused. Again, there's been some good actors. But what workers need when they come to Canada, they need a pathway to permanency, and they need to make sure that their rights are protected. I'm not going to get into where or who, but you know. I'm not going to pretend that you don't know. But there was temporary foreign workers abused here that came forward and said, we've been abused. And they made that claim. And I gotta give a shout out to a nonprofit that stepped forward and really helped out. But it showed the lack of support from the federal government when temporary foreign workers have been abused. I'll tell you, my staff went to the wall to help those foreign workers get an open work permit so they can get a better chance at making sure that they can work and participate in Canada, and hopefully a pathway to permanency. But you don't see conservatives standing up for those workers, those temporary foreign workers. And Liberals, they accelerated the temporary foreign worker program. We've got to get rid of it. It's got to go. We've got to create an immigration system that works for workers, works for people. We need immigration, obviously. Our healthcare system certainly does, and our construction industry. But we've seen a lot of outsourcing. We see outsourcing with highly paid consultants. It doubled under the Conservatives, quadrupled under the Liberals. We're seeing what's happening with the federal government and how they're allowing this runaway corporatization of workers, corporatization of public institutions. It's out of control. It's totally out of control, and workers' rights need to be fundamental for all of us.
Thomas Campbell, People's Party of Canada.
All right. Canada saw record immigration in 2023 with over 1.2 million new arrivals, straining housing and services. About 40% of our immigrants end up settling in two cities, Vancouver and Toronto. It puts tremendous strain on the rental stock, which then drives up the prices for everybody else, and it feathers out from there into the housing stock as well. The PBC solution for a lot of this would be to impose a temporary moratorium on immigration and reset the annual levels once things have stabilized back to the 100 to 150,000 levels, and focus on integrating who we've already brought. We don't have to be mean about this, we just need to change the incentives. There are a lot of temporary foreign workers that are overstaying their visas. We have the same problem with the student visas, where they're taking advantage of that. They're taking up the jobs that are supposed to be for our young people to get their legs under them and have the economic opportunities to get the training that they need to enter the workforce writ large. We're not anti-immigrant. They are some of the best members of any society that they manage to integrate themselves into, including ours. One of my first boss was a Chinese lady who came over in the late 60s with $100 to her name, 18 years old, no background and everything. And I met up with her coming into Y2K. She was, basically running a small team of programmers at the city of Calgary, entirely self-made on that. So that's the kind of pioneering spirit that the country was built on and that we need to return to. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now move into the closing statements. Candidates will have 3 minutes to offer their closing statements. It's a long day. We'll go in reverse order of the introductory statements. So we'll go first with Thomas Campbell.
All right. Every legacy party is going to promise you the world. They pay for it with borrowed money, high taxes, or printing dollars. All of it is inflationary, and it's one of the reasons that you're poor, more overworked, and more tightly controlled than ever. It is time for reform. A couple things to keep in mind. My North Star is more freedom for you and to minimize government interference. Any decision I would make on policy, I pass through that filter. There's a quote by Tom Sowell goes around every now and then I want to throw out there. How much is your fair share of what somebody else has earned? And what is their fair share of what you have earned? One of the things I'd like to see is for people to start voting differently, vote with your values or vote for the future, and instead of on your own immediate desires, which is what the legacy parties tend to play to. So consider this as a thought experiment. It doesn't have any actual numbers behind it, but think about it as a thought experiment of how you would vote. If a $100 handout of a program presented to you tonight meant that $1,000 a month of income for your children had to be sacrificed for the rest of their working lives, would you vote differently? One of the things that a lot of politicians and the governments in general have seemed to fail to forget, they've gone away from our basis. The money is not theirs to give on their pet projects or whatever they think needs to be done. It is entrusted delegation from us, the people, to that. And that's the power I want to see return to Parliament. The PPC offers a different path. Like I said, freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. We'll fight to protect your wallets and your rights and your future. We don't want any more band-aids, no more bribery. It's time for reform. Vote PPC and let's take our country back. Thank you.
Lord Johns, MVP.
Well, thanks. First, thank you to the organizers tonight, and thank you all for taking time to show up. Showing up is really important. And I'll say this, I show up in the House of Commons. I've been in the top 5% of rising in the House of Commons of all MPs in Canada. Second most in BC since I got elected. I replaced someone who was in the bottom 5%, a conservative. And I'm going to say this because it's important for you to know. I've mentioned Shashat on the floor of the House of Commons 38 times. He mentions Shashat once. I've mentioned Upachesset 26 times on the House of Commons. He mentioned Upachesset once. I've mentioned Port Alberni in the House of Commons 256 times. He's mentioned Port Alberni 36 times. So do you want to go back to being mentioned twice a year or 29 times a year? That's going to be your decision this election. Because we know what it's like to have a Conservative from Parksville represent us. We got underfunded. We got less money than the average riding for infrastructure. Why? Did they blackball us? Or did they take us for granted? Chris McNichol needs to explain that, because we don't know why. These are good questions, I think, in a job interview. And that's what this is tonight. Do you want to send someone to Ottawa that doesn't show up? That's the question I have for you. And I hope you'll leave with that question. There's a lot of things that I'm worried about when someone doesn't show up for an all-candidates debate. This is my 4th election. Never once have I seen a candidate not show up at a big event in the Comox Valley, in the Alberni Valley. They canceled the event in the Oceanside area because they knew he wasn't going to show up. So they're being told that they can't show up. And I'll tell you this, Pierre Poilievre ordered his MPs that they couldn't advocate for the Accelerator Fund. They couldn't advocate for their constituents. I'll tell you right now, you send me back to Ottawa, no one's stopping me. No one's stopping me from fighting for you, ever. I'll be there for you, I promise. Every day. But right now, what we're facing, a lot of disinformation about what's really impacting you and your cost of living. We know the prices at the pump, the grocery store, your bank fees, and your access to the internet are through the roof. And at the same time, big banks, big grocery are having record profits. You will never hear Conservatives ever call out the big corporations for record profits, but you'll always find the New Democrats will. We're going to take them on. That's what's driving the cost of inflation. That's what's hurting our country, where we can't invest in each other. We know what they did. They cut everywhere, cut support for veterans, seniors. They cut support for us. I hope you'll support me in this election to send back to Ottawa and fight for us.
Just want to take a second to thank Jolene Dick from the Chamber of Commerce, as well as everyone present here from the media, the Peak 93.3, David, and the Scoop from Alberni, as well as thank all of you for showing up tonight. It's a fantastic turnout, and I'm really, really heartened by what I'm seeing here tonight, what I'm hearing from everyone, and their responses to all the questions that we've been asked. And so I want to thank you for showing up. This election is about much more than Trump, taxes, or even tariffs. Our national identity is at stake, and our personal freedoms, as well as our sovereignty as Canadians, is under threat. When you go home tonight, I want you to think about the people in the United States that right now are being detained by ICE officials, simply for speaking out against atrocities that are happening in another place in the world, or for speaking out against atrocities that are happening at home. They don't get to go home to their families. They're in immigration or detention facilities right now. Some of them have been there for months. Some of them don't get access to food or water. That's what's coming here. Project 2025 is not a mirage. It is a very real and present danger, and it's going to have a real impact on our life unless we do something about it. So I want you to vote with your conscience and vote with your values. I want you to tell all of your neighbors and your families that this election is important and you need to get out and vote. That is the message I want to leave you with tonight, and we must all govern ourselves accordingly. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank the organizers, I'd like to thank all the candidates here, and I'd like to thank all of you for showing up. Yesterday, when I was at that senior center, I asked Chris McNichol, am I going to see you tomorrow? Are you going to come to the all-candidates meeting? His response was, I might be busy. That's how much he cares about the people in this riding. Now, this is a change election, and we need our representative working with the governing party. And I'm from Ottawa. I know the climate there. Mark Carney lowered rates during the recession, when every other G7 nation increased the rates, and it resulted in a soft landing for the Canadian economy. And every other G7 nation
followed suit and followed his leadership. I have the full support of Prime Minister Carney after speaking with him one-on-one last week. And the world needs less division. It's not a Canadian trait. We're stronger together, and we need to work together regardless of differences. This is a really important election, and as I mentioned, I biked across Canada. When I got to the easternmost point in North America, I made it to Cape Spear. I ended up going into a little pub, and I met a woman named Linda Henneberg. She, back in April in 1980, she was in an abusive relationship, had $10 to her name, and took herself for a walk along the St. John's Harbor. She saw a one-legged man dipping his foot in the ocean, and she walked up and asked him, "What are you doing?" And he introduced himself as Terry Fox, and he was about to run across Canada for cancer. She gave him her very last $10 to her name. And just like the dark days Linda was facing 45 years ago, we as Canadians are facing similar dark days. And just like 45 years ago, we had Terry Fox to unite Canada. Today, we have Mark Carney. And he will unite Canada, protect our country from outside pressures, and it's a clear choice between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. And who do you want? The person who helped ease the recession after such a dramatic time, or someone whose only platform is to attack, which isn't a Canadian trait? And if elected, I will stand by Mark Carney and more importantly, stand up for the people of Courtenay, Alberni. And I feel as though I don't need to reiterate this because you're all obviously quite interested in politics, but don't forget to vote on the 28th if you haven't already cast your ballot, and encourage your friends and family members to get out and vote, because this is quite possibly the most important election of our lifetime. Thank you for taking the time to come out here and listen to all your candidates. Thank you.
Teresa Knight, Animal Protection Party.
I'm going to start with a quote from Albert Einstein. He says, "Our task must be to free ourselves from our self-imposed prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and to the whole of nature in its beauty." And I couldn't agree more. I hope that when it comes time to vote this time around, you don't just vote on your own personal interests, but also consider the interests of the other inhabitants of the planet and vote with compassion for them. If we do move towards more plant-based society, it will, number one, be way cheaper for your grocery bill, because I eat without meat, and it just doesn't cost very much. I save a lot of money. Secondly, it relieves suffering of animals. And thirdly, it's way, way better for the planet, because animal agriculture contributes to a lot of the environmental degradation that is going on now. You have to realize that since I was in my teens, the population of the world has more than doubled. There are a lot of people competing for resources, and we have to start a path that goes backwards from growth towards some kind of a stasis economy, whereas growth just can't be sustained over time, and our party believes in what's called donut economics, which is a bit hard to explain at this moment, but does not include endless growth. So, I don't think it's a good idea to go down the path of profiting from the abuse and inhumane treatment of other beings on this planet. We all know if we have been abused in any way that it is not right. And I'd like to have us move forward to new ways of thinking about the world and the creatures that we share it with. And then I'm going to close with another quote, which is that a country is judged by the way it treats its animals, and not as Mohammedan.
Jesse Musel, Christian Heritage Party.
Thank you very much. I'll add my appreciation for each of you for coming out, for the organizers for putting on this event. Feels like a bit of a special honor to be the first and the last one to speak. Won't try to read too much into that. I wanted to highlight one topic that has seen little or no attention this evening, and that is our national debt. I remember as a young person seeing on a CBC News telecast some CBT television program of some sort, the national debt clock, and you could see it, and you could just see that the numbers ticking up, and that seemed like it was a big deal in the 90s, and I think our debt there then was probably less than a tenth of what it is now. I believe it's doubled under the current Liberal government, and I believe we're currently spending $125 million or more every single day, strictly just on interest payments. And I think that personally deserves a lot more attention than it's getting in this election and every election. The Christian Heritage Party is the only party with a platform that would require balanced budgets in absolutely every fiscal year, and the prioritization of paying down the debt so we don't saddle our children and our grandchildren with our overabundance in spending. I wanted to just kind of reiterate, many of you may or may not be familiar with the Christian worldview. Some of you may be leaving tonight not really understanding what perspective I was coming from, so I'd like to just share a little bit of background on what it is that I and the Christian Heritage Party believe. Christian Heritage Party, as I mentioned, is the only 100% pro-life political party in Canada. We believe that a human life before it is born is of no less precious and valuable than a human life after it is born. My fellow candidate here mentioned the protection of animals as being an important priority for them, and I believe it is accurate to say that the animals in Canada have more protection than children up until the point that they are born. The Christian Heritage Party is the only party that fully appreciates you can't offer medical assistance in dying without causing many people to view themselves as an unnecessary burden and feel an obligation to remove themselves and their hardships from this world. I believe that it is our shared responsibility to ensure that nobody, regardless of the difficulties they face, believes that their life has no value. We believe that every human being, including each one here, was created to reflect the image of God and His unimaginable and unexpressible worth. We believe that God loves each one of us, each of you, more than you can possibly comprehend. We believe the Bible is God's love letter to all of humanity. It contains reliable truth that supersedes our own flawed understanding, logic, and reasoning. We believe God has given us His instructions for the best way to live and to think. The men and women that established this country as a sovereign nation largely held these same beliefs. If this all sounds foreign to you, that's no surprise. In the recent decades, we've largely chosen another path. If you'd like to learn more about the Christian Heritage Party, please visit our website.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, candidates, for putting your name forward and being on the ballot for the federal election. We have some advanced voting days on the screen, and election day. Just a huge thank you to our audience members, both in person and online. Thank you, UKTube, Tofino and Ucluelet Chamber of Commerce, and the Teachers Union for sponsoring that portion of the event and making it more accessible. Thank you to my amazing team. Thank you to The Scoop. Thank you to our moderators. And thank you for citizens for being engaged. It is very brave to put your name forward, and I know that we only really had a chance to get through a handful of questions. That's just the way it goes. So we hope we did our best to inform everybody, and